Have you ever been a part of an art competition? And I don't just mean drawing or painting. This could be a marching band competition, competitive theater, or maybe speech. If so, you or someone else probably thought some part of these competitions was unfair, right? I mean, in the end, art is subjective. So how can a judge truly say one team is better than another when it comes down to, oh, well, I like this one more? Now, don't get me wrong, there are several elements of skill in each of these competitions. For example, good footwork in marching band or having lines memorized in theater. However, competitors can still make artistic choices meant to enhance the overall piece or performance, and without a way to explain these distinct choices to the judges, they're up to interpretation. For example, let's say a kid enters a painting contest, and for some deep, meaningful reason, he paints his entire canvas blue. And listen, I know this is an extreme example, but how does a judge quantify the creativity of the art in their final score? The same can be said for other art forms too. The one art piece or performance that stands out the most usually is the one to get the most praise from the judges. Is that truly assessing the skill of these competitors? These problems have been echoed for a long time. To quote Ted Snell in Adjudicator, no matter how many qualifications or years of professional engagement you have, your credibility is undermined by this assumption of subjectivity. So clearly, I'm not the only one who wonders if art can be judged at all. Some people even think they've been cheated from a higher placement, which makes sense because the reasons why someone is scored poorly often aren't clear or concise enough, so it's natural to feel the result is out of your control. But at the same time, these competitions have been run professionally for years, and the rules and criteria have been refined and refined again. It feels wrong to chalk competitions and the awards that people dedicate months of their lives to earn to just, oh, well, it's art, so it can't be judged at all. That's why I aim to find out how truly fair these competitions are. I'll be looking at statistics from different studies to prove if these competitions are reliable or if there's any bias from judges. And I'll finally answer the question, are competitions of art fair? Or should there be a change to these competitions to make them fairer? So, where do we start? Well, to find if competitions of art are biased, I want to look at a case study taking a deep look at a marching band competition. I think marching band is a good fit for this discussion, because marching band is an art form and creative decisions in the music and the formations are meant to enhance the experience. Marching band also has clear grading scales and criteria, making it perfect to take a closer look. Before I dive into the study, I should probably explain how the marching band scoring system works. So, here's a basic breakdown. An overall score is given to each band based on an average of several different categories, those categories being quality of sound, technique, musicianship, visual performance, and general effect. Every category is given a score from 5, which is bad, to 1, which is the best. The overall score determines who wins the competition, but there are also other awards for who scores the best in each category, and those are called caption awards. Now that that's covered, let's talk about the study in hand. All this information will come from a study done by Stephen E. Kane and Vernon analyzing a competition in the 2005 Virginia Band and Orchestra Directors Association State Marching Band Festival, well, it's VBOTA for short. What Kane and Burnstead did is they looked at every score the judges gave for each band in VBOTA, and they calculated the reliability for the judges' scoring method. They found the scoring method had a reliability of 0.95. So great! Now what does this mean? Well, reliability is a score ranging from 0 to 1, and a high reliability means that they can produce the same result under the same conditions. Now typically, you want a higher reliability, because then whatever method is being used means it's fair and consistent. In this case, the judge's reliability was a 0.95, which scores very high. Remember, the scale is from 0 to 1. This means whatever method the judges used at VBOTA was consistent, but most importantly, the method is fair. So what does this mean for our subjectivity topic? Well, if the judges in VBOTA gave scores solely on how much they enjoyed the performance, the method would be very inconsistent and the reliability should have been very low. However, because the reliability was a 0.95, which remember is really high, the judges likely have a sophisticated method for judging that gives anyone an equal chance at winning. One very important note I'd like to add is that this is still technically a subjective way to judge. Just because it's fair does not make it the one correct interpretation of marching band, or as art as a whole. The book Judging Merit by Warren Thorngate and others have a great line addressing this. While the judgment may ultimately be subjective, it is based on what philosophers of science sometimes term intersubjective agreement. Or basically, there's one way or one set of rules the judges will agree upon beforehand, and that's how they will judge. But wait, hold on. If it's all subjective, doesn't that mean everything we just talked about was pointless? Well, not exactly, because while it still may be subjective, the competition is still fair to everybody, which is what's truly important when you hand out awards. That being said, a state-level marching band competition like VBOTA is very sophisticated, and other competitions at a lower high school level may still be susceptible to bad judging methods. So then it's settled, right? Art competitions are fair, and we can stop worrying about which performance the judge liked more. Unfortunately, that's not true. There are still two main issues with this. One, the judging process may be fair, but the judges can still have bias. And two, if these competitions are truly fair like we concluded, then why are there still so many people who believe the judging process is inherently rigged? Well, we'll get to the second one later. For now, I want to address the first issue about bias. Now, you might be wondering, wait, why bias? I thought we just said the judges didn't have bias. And that may be true for the judges in VBOTA, but even though the method gives everyone an equal chance and is opinion-free, judges are still susceptible to bias. And that's proven to be an issue for almost all types of competitions. Now, it's important to distinguish the difference between what is a judge's bias versus is the method subjective. And those may seem like the same thing, but they can affect competitions in two completely different ways. We already tackled the subjectivity problem with VBOTA. So with that all being said, what is bias anyways, and how is it different from what we've been talking about? Well, according to Judging Merit, there are three main types of bias. The first is an emotional bias. This is when a judge has a personal relationship with a contestant. This could be a child, a friend, or a significant other. The second type of bias is a bias of first impressions. This is when a judge has a preconceived notion going into the competition. For example, let's say the contestant is an 18-time consecutive winner. The judge may be partial to them because they view them in a better light. And finally, the third type of bias is a cognitive bias. These are more logical and less controllable. An example is when someone performs in the first or last of their order. The judges are more likely to remember those people. Unlike subjectivity, which is what we've been talking about before, these three biases are entirely the judge's fault. Versus subjectivity, it's a problem with the overall format. So you can see why eliminating bias is equally important when trying to make competitions more fair. I would like to look at an example of bias affecting a competition. To do this, we can look at gymnastics. Unlike marching band or art, gymnastics is entirely judged on merit and skill, so there's no room for subjectivity. However, this makes gymnastics very susceptible to bias. There are reports dating back to 1970 of extreme bias in gymnastics judging. There was reported bias for gymnasts who appeared in different team orders. A study performed by D.M. Murray discovered judges will score teams of their own nationality significantly higher. And several other studies found that on lower levels, judges are inconsistent, change their scores to fit other judges, or they're just overall unexperienced. Safe to say, it was a mess. So, in 2006, a major change was made to gymnastics, an overhaul to the scoring system called the Code of Points. This new rulebook was meant to be the counter to all bias in gymnastics. The Code of Points could be implemented to every level of gymnastics, and with the purpose of making it as fair as possible. The only question is, did the new Code of Points succeed in eliminating bias? Well, a group of researchers performed a study to answer that very question. This group studied the women's gymnastics at the University Games in 2009, 3 years after the Code of Points change in 2006. Once again, the researchers were testing the reliability in the scores. They computed the final score for reliability was 0.95. It's funny, that's the same as VBOTA. But as we know, reliability is a score ranging from 0 to 1, so this is a very high score, and it suggests the new Code of Points worked. So back to the main topic. Why bother looking at all of this? It's to show that in order to make a fair competition for anything, including art, not only do we need a reliable scoring method, but we also need to take into consideration judges' bias. And if bias proves to be a common issue, then a change like the code of points should be implemented. So in conclusion, what did we learn? Firstly, despite what it may seem, a good art competition is not about making something that appeals to judges. Instead, the judging method is actually pretty solid, and it's built in a way that gives anyone going into it a fair chance at winning. And second, there are many different factors that can cause a judge to have a bias, and for a competition to be fair, they must limit these factors as much as possible. So then we're done, right? I mean, we just identified the best conditions to formulate a fair competition. Not quite. Remember earlier in the video, I identified 2 inherent issues with our conclusion about art competitions. Well, we covered the first one. So to remind you, the second issue is that people still believe these competitions are unfair. I mean, think about it. If the competitions are set up where everyone truly has a means to get first, like we concluded, then why do so many people still disagree with the setup? To quote Snell again, why do art competitions have a negative view that impacts the judge's credibility? I mean, take basketball for instance. When a team loses, is anyone questioning the integrity of the foundational rules of basketball? No, they have nobody to blame except the team. So then why are art competitions different? Why do so many people blame the judges or the format? I believe it comes down to one major factor, that, if applied, could make competitions appear fairer to the audience and reduce the backlash of this genre of competitions. And that one thing is debrief. What do I mean by debrief? Well, to put it simply, to have full transparency with your contestant before and after the competition. Being as explicit as possible on why they earned the score they did will ensure the contestant knows exactly what they did wrong, and they have no room to fight back with the judges. Roy Sunderland puts it greatly when listing everything he believes needs to be in place for a competition to be fair. There should also be the inclusion of subjective commentary to explain what the juror admired and why they scored them as they did, and where they felt the individual could improve. And I know that all the competitions I covered so far do have some sort of debrief, but the clearer the debrief is at telling you why the performance didn't meet every criteria, the more satisfied the contestant will be with their score. Despite this, a judge's debrief can feel unfair at times, like it's out of your control. The pointers meant to help sometimes boil down to, well, you're not creative enough. And what one judge wants could be completely different from another judge, so you can make the change one judge gave you and get docked points by another judge. In the end, it's all one big miscommunication. And it's true that art is completely subjective, but judges are still fair, and a good art competition should be clear with expectations beforehand. And when it doesn't do that, it can feel unfair to the competitor. That's why I believe this problem exists, and if I were to make one change to this format, it would be to have a standardized method for judging across all art forms. I want to end this video with a question, and that question is, what is the point of art? Because in the end, I believe art goes beyond these competitions. You can disagree with the judge if your art, your performance, or your choices don't fit what they're looking for. I mean, a low score doesn't make your art any less meaningful. In the end, there are 2 types of art that you can create. Art strictly for the competition, built to win by a set of fair rules. Or art to share, that's more creative, and it may break the standard mold. And the problem is when the latter gets mixed up in a competition, that competition can fall apart. And I believe that's the truth behind it all. Thank you for watching.